Let us have a toast, you beautiful people out there. I hope your Thanksgiving was lovely. But we're right back on the saddle. Only a 10-game slate, right? Normally it's like 11, 12, or 13. It's a nice 10-game slate on Sunday, and most people are not ready for it. It's an interesting slate because there's not that many high totals. Only one game opened with over a total over 50, and it was barely there at 50.5. So hope your Thanksgiving, you ladies, you gentlemen, you fellas. I hope it was great. Lovely Thanksgiving on my end. But now it's time to sit back, relax, and max all cool, and we get into this Sunday slate, and we're gonna break it down on the final thoughts: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, all those bad things. And again, it's an interesting week because most people's content or viewing habits that normally start on like Tuesday, right, early in the week for NFL DFS on Sunday, it's not gonna start until Friday now. And you know what people do on Fridays? They're with their family from Thanksgiving. Naturally, you're going out, you're chilling out, relaxing, maxing all cool. Saturdays and the weekend, people are not gonna be anywhere near as prepared. It's gonna be Saturday night, Sunday morning when a large amount of people, more so than usual, go, oh damn, I got to get some DFS lineups in. Oh damn, I don't have the normal amount of time to actually do all this research and look through all these projections and leverage and all that stuff. So you, the beautiful person watching this video right now, you're going to have a leg up because we're going really deep here on these 20 teams, these 10 games, and let's start it right now with that. So we slide in, we transition to the quarterbacks, and I have this different than usual. It's not going to just be my interests. We're going to scroll quickly through the salary, right? And I'll kind of go through there. So you can start up top with Tom Brady. So this is a slate where it's not, there's still good quarterbacks on the slate, but not as loaded. You don't have Lamar, you don't have Mahomes, you don't have Josh Allen because of primetime, bye weeks, Kyler Murray not out there, and also just the Thanksgiving slate had a couple of decent quarterbacks on it, really just Josh Allen and Dak for the most part. So you get Brady priced up to $7,600. He is expensive, but he's the most expensive. We don't have an $8,000 quarterback. And Tom Brady's coming off of a game where it didn't even seem like he was trying. He didn't have Antonio Brown. He did get Gronk back, which ended up mattering a lot, especially Gronk beating the zone of the Giants playing two high safeties. And Tom Brady ends up going out there, hits the 300-yard bonus, a couple touchdowns. He gets 24 points. It's a fine Brady day. You haven't had the 3+ touchdown game from Tom Brady now in about 3 weeks, but it's always lingering. You have a questionable Antonio Brown, no setbacks for Gronk. So the offense, if anything, is now getting healthier against this Colts defense. And the Colts defense overall, it is a solid unit, right? When they bring their pass rush, what they can do with their front, but their secondary is not the greatest, and they're facing the number one passing offense that is going to have a positive offensive line advantage. Shout out Tristan Wirfs on that offensive line for Tampa Bay. So Brady's going to look good. Now, is Brady the best option this week? It starts to become difficult. He has the highest team total and only 26.25, right? Most weeks we're talking about a team total at least at 28.5 and usually in the 30s. But again, these games this week have lower team totals. The matchups are driving down the team totals, the injuries that are taking place later in the season. So now you start to go down. I'm not that interested in Hurts. I know he's balling out. He finally got his first rushing touchdown in about over a month, and he got 3 for you in the game, but he's not passing as much. They want to keep running the ball. It's going to lead, in general, in my opinion, to less overall points, but a nice total there for him. But then you get down to this range where it's Stafford versus Aaron Rodgers. And you might see last week, the only stacks that really worked out for you was Minnesota and the Packers. If you had one share of that game stack either side, you probably profited or did pretty well. And I expect that some people who ended up going there and just in general are going to try and go back to it this week because there's a 48 implied game total, and outside of that Indy and Tampa Bay game, it's basically the next highest total on the slate, even though that's not that high. You have price points at $7,100 and $6,900, which are completely fair for Stafford and Rodgers. Both teams, it's basically a coin flip right now, a 1-point spread. Both teams projecting out for around a 24-team implied total, which would rank right around, second, third on this slate. So it's a nice spot for both of these guys. The interesting thing, though, that can completely blow this up is the fact that the Packers offensive line is going to be without David Bakhtiari. They're now without Elkton Jenkins, who not a lot of people might not know that name right now, but he is arguably in line to get the biggest offensive line contract that you have ever seen once Quentin Nelson signs his this offseason, and then it's going to be Jenkins' chance the year after that. He is fantastic. So now they're down their 2 best offensive linemen. Their offensive line has good replacements, but you're going up against Aaron Donald, Von Miller, this front in general. You maybe have Jalen Ramsey, the only guy in the league who potentially can stand the chance against Devontae Adams. So it is a totally different matchup than last week against Minnesota, who brings some nice disguises and some nice blitzes in general against Rodgers, but the secondary and the talent that they have up there does not really match what's happening here. So this is a different situation for sure, right? It's still a decent team total, but a totally different situation. And of course, you always have to try and hit on that MVS big play like you had last week for a 75-yard touchdown. That's not always going to happen. It's probably going to happen 1 to 3 times a year. So I do like Aaron Rodgers this week, but I would lean more to the side of Matthew Stafford. Now, Stafford is struggling, and he's struggling against not that great teams, but divisional matchups, right? San Francisco is a divisional matchup. It's a different thing. That team knows you. Kyle Kyle Shanahan continues to beat every single time he plays Sean McVay. He continues to beat him. So it's a different story there. Even though San Fran's secondary isn't great and it's banged up, it's still a divisional matchup. The week before that, he gets Tennessee, almost goes for the 300-yard bonus, but in general, just 6.1 yards per attempt. So it's been a couple of weeks now, right? I mean, Stafford all season long starts the year off with 12 yards per attempt, then 9, 7, 10, 9, 8, 9.5 yards per attempt, meaning he's targeting downfield. He's getting good usage. The upside is obviously there. The 300-yard bonuses are getting schmacked almost every single week. The last 2 weeks, 6.1 and 5.9 yards per attempt. Now, part of that reason is they didn't have Robert Woods in that last game of divisional matchup, and then they did struggle against Tennessee, who basically buzzsaw them, right? So it's back-to-back games in prime time that they have ended up getting spanked. They've had a little bit of time now to regroup, so I do think that this matchup that you're going to see here, Stafford is somebody who does stand out. You get a nice and likely going to be more involved priced Odell. You get a fair priced, I mean, he's expensive, of course, Cooper Kupp, but fair for what his overall target share is. Now there's no Robert Woods. And I think Van Jefferson and Tyler Higbee are great options. So you have a lot of options in those stacks. I think that Stafford's $7,100 price tag, you're basically just getting a discount version of Tom Brady, in my opinion. Like, if you compare their stats this year, Brady's thrown like 40 times per game. You're getting 36 times per game right now for Stafford. Stafford averaging 301 yards per game, Brady about 317. Brady obviously has a little bit better of stats, but for the most part, both averaging the bonus of 3+ point bonus for 300 yards. Stafford right now is an 8.3 yards per attempt to Brady's 7.5. Stafford's weapons are healthy when Antonio Brown is a little bit murky. So I think both are definitely in play. They both stand out. I think those two guys stand out as two of like the 3 or 4 best stacking options. We can scroll a little bit down here, and the guy on the top of the screen now in Justin Herbert is another guy who's really fairly priced. I mean, 2 out of his last 3 games, he's basically winning slates for you. Obviously, the last one was on a Sunday Night Football showdown slate, but you probably had to have him to win that slate. And when I mentioned that Stafford's like a discount off of a Tom Brady, I mean, Herbert is the ultimate discount off of both. Herbert's throwing 39.5 times per game right now. He's averaging 293 yards per game. They kind of seem to get the gist of, oh, okay, we probably shouldn't just be attempting these short passes. We should let Herbert target downfield more and take these risks. Sure, it might lead to a turnover. It might lead to an interception, which is not desired. And in that game, it led to 1 interception. But oh yeah, it's also leading to 382 passing yards of victory, right? The 90 rushing yards was a nice little bonus that we've seen. That's the first time he's gone over 30 and the first time he's gone over 25 all the way back since, I believe, week 5 against Cleveland. So if we get that dimension to it, it looks a lot better. And you know the stacking options. I mean, Mike Williams doesn't feel the greatest, but Keenan Allen is the clear stacking option. There's Williams there. I think Eckler is one of the few running backs you can stack up, hence the 2 passing touchdowns last time out with his quarterback. And the other big thing is that you have the punt in Jared Cook at tight end. So Herbert, if you're just looking about the salary relief for similar upside, right? You're talking about Herbert right now having in 2 out of his last 3 weeks, 35 plus DraftKings points. That starts to feel good. But now we get to this range where it is the wild, wild west, and this slate starts to become really interesting. Like Joe Burrow is here, back-to-back games of not topping 10 fantasy points. All the rushing touchdowns are happening earlier in the year, right? We said this earlier in the year that Joe Mixon is not having any rushing touchdowns this year. That is going to change because Joe Burrow, this team, in their first 9 touchdowns of the year, 8 of them were passing. All of them to Jamar Chase, all this stuff. That's definitely going to change. And now it's almost overcorrected with Joe Burrow not having a touchdown in each of his past 2 games. Burrow is 6,200 with a nice team implied total, divisional matchup. It's tough to really love the situation for Burrow here, but he's not going to be owned based on the fact that the past 2 weeks nobody owned him and the team total looks nice. You keep going down a little bit more and Jimmy G is on here. When do I ever want to play Jimmy Garoppolo in a GPP? Really never that much. I had him for the first time 4% owned last week, and it somewhat worked out for you, right? He connected with Brandon Ayuk. Debo's rushing touchdown and the usage that they're giving Debo in the backfield doesn't help him. If Elijah Mitchell does return, you expect him to be more efficient than what Jeff Wilson and Trey Sermon did last week, which was not good at all on the ground, which will hurt Jimmy Garoppolo, of course. Like, Garoppolo can have these good games. Like, these last couple of games for Garoppolo have been good, right? He's averaging 9.6, 8 yards per attempt. He's just not throwing enough. They're running the ball. They ran 40 plus times in that last game. He's had 19 and 22 attempts in these last 2 games, and he's playing well in real life. It's just not contributing. Like week 9 against Arizona, 40 attempts. He goes for 23.3 DraftKings points. That's the type of usage you're going to have to see. You're going to have to see Jimmy Garoppolo in a game actually end up trailing. In a game right now, they're 3-point favorites versus Minnesota. It could turn into some sort of a shootout environment against this Minnesota defense that is not good by any means. You saw that last week with the Packers. At $5,700, though, it starts to become a tough ask when you go down a little bit in the pricing here and you get to this range where I'd just rather take a dart on these fellas. So instead of Jimmy G, I'd rather take a dart on these 2 players right here. $5,600 Cam Newton. If you want to go right back to Cam Newton after having the double touchdown game last week, you're probably going to mainly get there from what he can do on the ground. I think that's completely fine to go to it. Cam Newton ended up seeing, I believe, in that game, a very solid 26.2 DraftKings points because he had 46 rushing yards and over 10 fantasy points on the ground with the touchdown. The other guy down here who I normally say I don't like, and it'll depend on ownership, is Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan Ryan is going to have one of his best odds of being the winning lineup quarterback because it's just a 10-game slate. There's not as great pricing on the top-end quarterbacks this week. There's not as many good ones in general. So Matt Ryan, a guy who actually throws a lot per game, right? This is a guy who's going to go out there, attempt a bunch of passes. He's throwing 35 times per game. He's averaging the most passing yards basically out of anybody below this price range with 243 per game. A decent completion percentage. The problem with Matt Ryan is just what are his weapons? Other teams are just absolutely taking away Kyle Pitts, putting a cornerback on him, and he is struggling with that. And then after that, there's no Calvin Ridley. Cordell Patterson, we hope he returns to just keep this offense moving. But Matt Ryan would be the guy that you would go to down in this range because he has a nice 24 team implied total, which does look nice. The problem is 3 and 4 fantasy points in his last 2 games because he has no offensive weapons. So these guys are in play, but it starts to become really murky. I would lean to Cam Newton over Matt Ryan. The only other guy that stands out is all the way down at $5,200. Or $5,300. I do think it's viable against the Jets with a 23.5 team total. A favorite, Tyrod Taylor, who had 2 rushing touchdowns last week. Since returning from injury, he has not looked good in the passing game. You have the clear stacking option, though, if you wanted to go there with a Brandon Cooks and can run it back on the Jets with Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Crowder, or you can just run him naked, which I don't normally do, but it could be in play this week. I think that is some other guys down in this range. But once you get below the price range of Justin Herbert, it starts to become very murky. It's guys who are fluky. It's guys who are flaky. It's guys who aren't consistent. I would say below Justin Herbert's price tag outside of Joe Burrow at $6,200, it's probably Cam Newton. And then after that, I don't feel confident in any of those dudes. So there is the quarterback position for all of you beautiful people out there. We'll now slide on a late night into the running back position, but before we do, I do want to open up right now a pack, and it's dibs.io. They're giving me a free pack, a $70 pack, and what this is a fractional card. It's digital cards. If you know about like Top Shot, it's similar to that, and it's dibs.io. They have NFTs. They have a marketplace to buy and sell fractional shares of cards. If you use the link in the description and my name, Sal, simple as that, S-A-L, they will go in and give you a free pack worth up to $50, and then I negotiated this. I was like, why just give one? Why not 2? And then they will give you an email with another one if you're a part of that user base. So we put the code in here. It says we earned the free pack. This is me opening it live right now, so hopefully no Houdini shit happens and this ends up getting busted here. But let's open this pack and see what we get. I have a couple of shares of players, some top-end players. The pack is now opening, and you have to be fucking kidding me. You have to be kidding me. We just got on this channel. Did they load this in here? No fucking way. We just got a 2005 Aaron Rodgers rookie card. I mean, it's a fraction of it. It's not the entire card, but a fraction of it, right? We currently own now 0.81%. So about 1% of this Aaron Rodgers rookie card, which is valued at about $21. So that's our first asset, an Aaron Rodgers rookie card. If you're a part of this channel, if you know, you know. Shout out to GOAT Aaron Rodgers. Let's see what the next asset is. The next asset is going to be a Luka Doncic Prism 2018, which I believe is his rookie card. We own 2.9% of that card. So this is pretty damn cool. You could do the same thing. You can open this the same way. If you use the code SAL, you'll get a free pack to start with, and then another pack emailed to you, so 2 free packs. The next asset is Dak Prescott. So Dak Prescott 2016, I believe that's also his rookie year if I'm not mistaken. We own 2.4% of that bad boy. And this money that it's saying right here, approximate worth, like we're just getting that right now. So $14, the Luka was a certain amount, so we've already made like $40. This next one is worth $10. We own only 0.05% of it, but it's a KD all the way back to the Sonics days rookie card. We love to see that. We don't own much of this one though, probably because it's just such a rare card. There's not that many shares going out, or there's so many shares going out, if that makes sense. We own 1.3% of Drew Brees all the way back to the Chargers days before those trades happened. 2001 rookie card. So all right, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. So now my collection on Dibs is looking pretty damn good. I mean, we just added this to my wallet. So we already had like Mike Trout rookie cards, Chris Godwin rookie cards, DK Metcalf, and this is the one that I love. Look at this. It's like a hologram, a refractor Aaron Rodgers. God damn, you love to see that one. This card itself is worth $2,500. We own about 1% of it and worth $17. And the market's always moving. You can buy and sell in the marketplace if you didn't want to just buy packs. So go ahead and check it out. It's dibs.io. There's a link down below. If you use the code SAL when you sign up, you get a free pack. You have to sign up and deposit. You use the code SAL, you get a free pack up to $50, and then they'll give you another one right back. So that's the presenting sponsor of the show. Let me know in the comments if you like it. I know a lot of people are into the NFT space and also the trading card space. It's kind of a combination of both right now. Check it out, dibs.io, code SAL for those free packs. All right, so now we get to the running back position, and up top, you now have the most expensive running back on the week and almost one of the ones on the year, and it's going to be $9,100 Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is very expensive. He has to be in play. He continues to just get so many touches, but yet again, he's going to come in as an underdog. But yet again, his team has a nice team total. It doesn't matter who they're running against. If Vita Vea is out, that obviously helps even more. This Tampa Bay Bucs defense has been banged up. It has not been the same run defense as it once has been, but since they get up and they get leads on teams, it makes it easier for them to not have to give up a lot of yards because teams just opt not to run against them. But Indy is going to have a positive 62% run blocking advantage in this one, so it is now a totally different story. Taylor is going to remain in play. But if you're telling me to choose between Jonathan Taylor and McCaffrey, I'm just going to continue to choose Christian McCaffrey, right? McCaffrey finally gets in the end zone. He has had a 30+% target share in back-to-back games. He saw like 90+% of the opportunity running back shares last week on the ground. So for similar price tags, I'll take McCaffrey, who I know is going to be getting there, not only on the ground, not only has a chance to see those 20 carries like Jonathan Taylor, and as long as Taylor isn't scoring 5 touchdowns and it's an equal playing field from the 1 to 2 touchdown range, I think that McCaffrey with a 30% target share compared to Jonathan Taylor, who's going to see somewhere around a 8 to 10% target share, I will lean to McCaffrey if I had to choose one. I will also lean for similar reasons to Austin Eckler at $8,400, a better team total here, and it's mainly because of the receiving game work and also the price discount. All else equal, same price. Jonathan Taylor looks like a better play because of the touch volume, but Austin Eckler says, hold my beer. He doesn't get to 5, but he gets to 4. And Austin Eckler now, you're just getting not that many carries, right? Austin Eckler has only topped over the last 5 weeks 11 carries once, but we don't really care about that because he's had games of 6, 7, 10, 7 targets 4 out of his last 5 games, and that allows him to put up these productions of 27, 45, right, 18, and 11 fantasy points. So Eckler is in play. Again, I prefer McCaffrey in that range. Eckler is kind of comparing him to like a Najee Harris if you were choosing between the two. The guy that I like the most in the $8,000 range, though, out of all these $8,000 range running backs, is going to be Dalvin Cook, because Dalvin Cook quietly isn't getting all the steam and all the love that he should be getting because of the fact that he's been injured multiple times this year, because of the allegations coming out against him. I know nothing about those. I don't know any of the details, but of course that's always going to drive a negative narrative. But if we're talking purely football here, he just continues to go out there and get 20+ opportunities. Last week, 26 opportunities. The week before that, 29 opportunities. The week before that, 20 opportunities. He's getting 20+ opportunities every single week. He is basically getting the Najee Harris workload, except in a better offense, normally having a better team total, like he does this week with Najee Harris, right? He has a 23 compared to Harris's 21 team implied total. He has a positive 20% run blocking advantage in this one as well. Everything is looking good for Mr. Dalvin Cook this week. It continues to look good for Mr. Dalvin Cook. The opportunity share is elite, with Madison seeing only 4 opportunities in 3 touches last week. So Dalvin Cook, for me, out of all these running backs in the $8,000 range, he's going to be my favorite. If I look at my projections, you can check out my projections down below. I currently have Dalvin Cook projecting out for 19.5 fantasy points, which is the most out of any running back in the $8,000 range. To the $7,000 range, we go, and it's just one player. So we quickly go from the 8 to the 6K range because Joe Mixon is the only guy in the $7,000 range. I think he's appropriately priced. I've got him for like 17.7 fantasy points, which just means he's a fine play, a favorite in a divisional matchup. Matchup against the Steelers isn't the greatest, but it's also not the worst. It'll still be like a positive 10% run blocking advantage for Mixon. They're going to mix in much more now. That's kind of the way. He's got 18 and 30 opportunities in the last 2 games. The problem is he's just priced for it now. So if he's low owned like he was last week, it's an opportunity to get to him. Otherwise, there's not much reason to. Leonard Fournette for me is a maybe right now, just because that price tag did come up. They did give Ronald Jones, and it wasn't in garbage time, they did give Ronald Jones some more usage in that last game, but you still got Fournette involved in the passing game. The passing production is so firmly there, even ahead of Giovanni Bernard. Bernard only ran like 6 routes in that last game, and Leonard Fournette came out and ran 25 routes and caught 6 balls on 6 targets. In his floor game, Leonard Fournette, in a bad game, sees 16 touches and 13.5 fantasy points in a game where he does not score a touchdown. The guy is just so secure right now for fantasy points. I have him for like 16.5 fantasy points. The price tag is just appropriate, similar to Mixon, but the fact that he has the highest team total and he is a favorite in a solid matchup, it keeps Leonard Fournette with a positive 40% run blocking advantage this week, firmly in play against the Colts, who do struggle to tackle. Cordell Patterson, track his status to see if he's returning. Tough to really want to get to Cordell Patterson because he doesn't correlate the best, because he's not running a ton of routes with Matt Ryan if you wanted to stack that. I prefer Leonard Fournette next to him in the price tag. I prefer Saquon Barkley, who we'll see if Saquon Barkley, who said his injury is definitely on his mind, but Saquon Barkley came out, saw 75% of the running back opportunities, caught all 6 of the targets that came his way, which was very good to see that he ended up seeing those targets. Before his injury, he had 7 and 6 targets. So it was like, okay, we're getting old Saquon back. It was nice to see he came right back with a 6 target, 6 reception game on 22 routes run. They didn't run the ball a lot, but I would expect him to maybe run the ball a little bit more in this game against their rival Philadelphia, which will slow the pace of that game down. But I do like Saquon at 6,300. I mean, Saquon Barkley, there's not many times you're going to get Saquon Barkley at this low of a price range. We got it when he came back from injury, and what did he proceed to do? He proceeded to go out there and score 21.4 fantasy points, and then he followed that up with a 30+ point fantasy point day. So Saquon, I expect ownership to come in on him. He stands out. James Robinson right there in the pricing also stands out. Robinson, it's rare that Jacksonville is not going to be like an 8-point underdog, only a 1-point underdog, a nice team total of 23. versus Atlanta here. It's going to be good things for Robinson. Robinson last week still sees 15 opportunities in one of the worst situations against a tough defensive line in San Fran. Now gets a bottom two, like one of the worst defensive lines. One is Jacksonville, his own team. Another is Houston. And then Atlanta is probably the worst talent-wise defensive line in the league. Robinson looks good. So in that $6,000 range, the two favorite running backs are going to be Saquon and James Robinson. We can now scroll to the $5,000 range where there's a couple of guys here, a couple that definitely stand out. A.J. Dillon, I'm expecting Aaron Jones to miss. They have a bye week next week. This is an injury that normally takes at least 2 weeks to come back from. It's only been 1 week. I would expect him to come back at the soonest after the bye week. And if that's the case, A.J. Dillon, he let a lot of people down, but he still scored nearly 16 fantasy points because he got there in the passing game. This is a guy who is going to get red zone opportunities. He is a favorite in this game, barely a 1-point favorite with a 24.5 team implied total. It's a fine spot for A.J. Dillon yet again, especially if he gets that pass catching work. The problem is he's facing the number one run defense in the NFL. But the price tag comes down. A.J. Dillon ended up last week seeing 17 opportunities, 97 total yards, and 16 fantasy points. So Dillon, price point comes down after that. I get it, the matchup isn't great, but if the passing work is there, we like Dillon a good amount. Henderson on the opposite side of that game, I do think goes a little bit over noticed, but he's kind of priced for what that role will be. The Packers are a number one tackling team in the NFL. Makes it tough to love Henderson. Myles Gaskin, it's hard to put him on here as a no. Like Duke Johnson got the active, not start, but he was activated for that game for Miami. He just didn't see the touches. I mean, Myles Gaskin workload these last 3 weeks is insane right now. He has seen 26, 16, and 26 touches over these last couple of weeks, and he hasn't even topped 100 yards. He's like barely getting you there in that standpoint. He's touchdown or bust, even though he's getting insane volume, and now he gets Carolina, which is not the greatest of matchups. So a yes might be a little bit extreme. I'm actually going to put him to a maybe because I always choose in this price range A.J. Dillon, or I scroll down to this guy who stands out a lot right now, and it's Miles Sanders at 5,100. Jordan Howard's not expected to play. Maybe you get Kenny Gainwell active, but Miles Sanders came back from injury, and he's looked good. And this team just wants to run the ball. That's where they have the biggest advantage right now. One of the best run-blocking offensive lines in the NFL is this Philadelphia Eagles team. They currently rank 7th in run offense and 8th in run blocking. So Miles Sanders comes back from injury. He sees 17 opportunities, 94 total yards. He just wasn't finding the end zone because 3 rushing touchdowns for Jalen Hurts. That's not always going to be the case, as you saw the previous 4 games when Hurts didn't have any rushing touchdowns. So Sanders, 25 team implied total, nice price point, 3-point favorite. Looks like one of the best value running back plays on the slate right now. Miles Sanders actually grades out as my number 2 running back play behind A.J. Dillon on the week. If you're looking for a punt running back after that, it's just the Jets running backs Coleman and Ty Johnson. With Michael Carter expected to miss some time with an ankle sprain, I would expect Ty Johnson to be the benefactor the most here. Tevin Coleman might get more carries, but we care about the targets more so than the carries. And Ty Johnson, that's where he kind of elevates himself. Ty Johnson grades out as my 4th number value play this week, or number 4 value running back play this week. He's going to look pretty nice. I know he only had 1 carry last week and 1 target. That is going to change though. Zach Wilson now back under center also will probably lead to more checkdowns over Joe Flacco. So that is the running back position in a nutshell. Again, if you want to see any of those projections, where all my players rank, their ownerships, the Discord, the optimizer, a bunch of other tools, it's all on Patreon down below. Check it out. Come join the community. 1,000+ members are enjoying it, are enjoying the process, are enjoying the community in the Discord. So you can check that out. You can come join along as we slide into the wide receiver position. So coming off of the bye week, you get this Rams game environment that's going to look good, right? These 2 wide receivers, similar to last week with Jefferson and Adam, 2 of the most expensive wide receivers. This week, they are the 2 most expensive wide receivers going up against each other in Kupp and Adams. Getting to both of them is a really tough task, but when you have Ty Johnson, when you have Miles Sanders, it becomes a little bit easier, but still a very tough task. If you want to look at it, the Rams are coming off of the bye week. It's pretty clear that Kupp is the obvious number 1 here. In week 10, he ran 42 routes. He had 13 targets, 122 yards. He had like half of Stafford's overall yardage. He is in play, but now he's all the way priced up. Like, this is a $9,600 Cooper Kupp, which normally Cooper Kupp is just like an automatic yes for me. But as you can see this week, he's not an automatic yes. Even at a really nice projection, my highest projection on the week is for Cooper Kupp. Even at that nice projection for me, the fact that he is this expensive, normally he's like still a top 5 value. It actually bumps Cooper Kupp all the way down to being my number 13 point per dollar value. So when you're that expensive and you're not even going to be that great relative to some other guys around you, it's tough. And one of those guys around him is going to be Davante Adams. Davante Adams, who just kind of is going to do whatever he wants. I know it's Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey is playing a lot of inside linebacker, a lot of slot cornerback this year. That's where he's kind of playing to elevate them on the interior. I don't know if he'll shadow. He hasn't been shadowing a lot, Davante Adams. But even if he does, I'm not too concerned about that. What I would be more concerned about is the price point on Davante Adams. That being said, Davante Adams averaged 22.8 fantasy points. Davante Adams in his 10.6 targets per game and his 40% of the team's air yard share right now. I like that a whole lot. I have Adams right now as my number 2 value, actually, even though he's the 2nd most expensive on the slate. Justin Jefferson finally getting priced close up to where he deserves to be. He'll probably be low owned yet again because of that. He's been under 5% owned in like 4 or 5 straight weeks, and he continues to smash. So if that's the case again, yes, I'm going to have Justin Jefferson shares. Debo is a concern. If there was one wide receiver right now above the $7,000 price range, Debo would probably be the one that I wouldn't play. One, because his price range is $7,900. Two, because Brandon Ayuk and Kittle continue to be heavily involved. This team wants to run the ball a lot. And yeah, Debo's been getting in on the ground, right? Back-to-back games of having a rushing touchdown, but he's not always going to have a 25-yard rushing touchdown, especially when your team total, look, it's a 25.75 team total. It looks really good against Minnesota. And at the flip of a switch in a good matchup in the secondary here, you can see Debo just see his 10 target games, but he's staying at the same price point, even though his passing usage is being infiltrated now over the past month by a Brandon Ayuk. And that has to be worth something, but in his price tag, it's not moving it. So if there's one guy above 7K that I would get away from, it would be Debo. I'd rather just go to Jefferson, who I expect to be lower owned. Now, my favorite play above $7,000 this week, I mean, Adams is probably that guy if you can afford him, but that's going to be a little bit tough. It's going to end up being Keenan Allen. The nice team total here, it's a fair price point of $7,400 for a guy who continues to just go out there now since this bye week, right? After coming out of the bye week, continues to go out there and see all the volume, reconnect as Mike Williams is getting phased out a little bit, reconnect with Justin Herbert. And Herbert's a fair price point too. So this is just a really easy stack to get to. You look at where you can kind of run it back on the opposite side of this game, and Denver does have some options, whether it's punting tight end, whether it's Jerry Jeudy, a very low owned, likely to be Courtland Sutton this week. But you now have 11, 13, 11, and 13 targets. He's averaging 12 targets per game over the last 4 games is Mr. Keenan Allen. Everything is working for him. In that time, he scored 20, 25, 18, and 23 fantasy points. Keenan Allen would be the best option up here. I don't think it's going to shock anybody. You keep scrolling, and guys that will be in stacking chances, like Jamar Chase, although the touchdowns are coming down, the volume is coming up. He has more volume over the last month than he did the first month when he was popping off. That eventually is going to balance out to have these nice overall games. He's a fair price point. You start to get to these Tampa Bay receivers now as we close out the 7K range. Track A.J. Brown's status. I currently have him. Terrible team total. Tough matchup. If there's anybody you're going to try and take out of the offense if you're Bill Belichick, it's potentially A.J. Brown if he's even activated. Got banged up last week. But these Tampa receivers are now really close in price tag. We have to see what happens with the ankle injury on Antonio Brown. He is expected to return, or he is able to return, barring like the ankle. He's able to after this COVID stuff's getting hashed out apparently. If you force me to choose one between Chris Godwin and Evans, Evans finally got that volume going back, but it's still going to be Chris Godwin, who seems to be healthy. And when he's running on the outside, he kind of takes a lot more of those Antonio Brown routes. So if Antonio Brown's in, he's my favorite stack in those Tampa Bay stacks. If Antonio Brown is out, it would be Godwin at 7,000. But do not be afraid to go to both of these guys. It makes the stack very expensive, but Indy has some cheap guys, not Jonathan Taylor, but T.Y. Hilton's, even Pittman's a fair price tag, and you get those other value running backs that can make that stack work out for you. Out of all of the players in the $6,000 range, and it's not that big of a 6K range. Normally we have a lot of guys. It's just Thielen, Deontay, Devonta, DJ Moore, and Chase Claypool. It's 5 guys and a couple of guys who are kind of not having the best quarterback play, inconsistent quarterback play from Chase Claypool, DJ Moore, and even Devonta Smith. Hurts is playing well on the ground, but passing-wise not there. And then you get Adam Thielen, who continues to just be steady, right? Steady Adam Thielen, like 7+ targets every single week so far this year, averaging 8.3 targets per game. He looks great, but the other guy who's going to stand out is Deontay Johnson. I mean, I don't know how Deontay Johnson is not in the 7K range. I look at Deontay Johnson and Keenan Allen as very similar players. Guys that are just clearly their offense is number one. They have a red zone role. They're good after the catch, and they're good at getting separation, right? And now that Deontay Johnson isn't dropping every single thing coming his way like he was last year, it's starting to work out. Deontay Johnson has 13 targets in 3 out of his last 4 games. Similar to Keenan Allen, he's popping off. 16, 12, 13, and 26 fantasy points over his last 4 games after finishing as the wide receiver 4 last week. I mean, he's just running so many routes, right? 39 routes in that game. Against Cincinnati here, divisional matchup, sure, but they're underdogs. Expect Big Ben to continue to throw for like 37 times a game. Deontay at $6,600 currently grades out as my number 6 overall value play at the wide receiver position for 16.8 fantasy points, and he looks really good over on SuperDraft. Now we transition to the 5K range, where this 5K range is where like all, outside of Deontay Johnson at $6,600, this is where like all those value type of wide receiver plays are. You can see that I have a bunch of yeses on the slate right here. We can talk about the guys up top at first. Jalen Waddle leads the NFL in routes run per game. Part of that is because, I mean, he's had guys injured on his team. The other part of that is because they haven't had their bye week yet. I believe that'll be next week. But just in general, he continues to go out there. He had a rushing touchdown last week. He keeps seeing the volume. 2 red zone targets, a red zone carry last week for the touchdown. Keeps seeing the volume, has 9 targets now. After week 11 against the Jets, gets a not that great matchup here against Carolina, but he'll be moved into the slot enough to get away from a Stephon Gilmore. So you're looking at now 12, 10, 6, and 9 targets over the last month of the season. No news. It's leaning towards not playing Devontae Parker. It's leaning towards not playing Will Fuller. So yet again, expect him to go out there. He's put up performances now of 16, 10, and 20.5 fantasy points over the last 3 games. Waddle stands out as a solid value. Waddle stands out for me right now is right around like my number 8 value on the slate. But the guy that I want to go to, next to Jalen Waddle in the price tag, the fact that Waddle has been producing fantasy points-wise lately, the fact that there's a lot of guys right below Brandon Cooks, probably leads, I mean, you have no passing yards these last 2 games for Tyrod Taylor, probably leads to Brandon Cooks being lower owned than he should be. I mean, Cooks led this team last week with 27 routes, right? The fact that they got up on Tennessee, they didn't throw the ball all that much. He only saw 3 targets in that game. So now that Brandon Cooks is coming off of a 3-target game where he scores 4 fantasy points, he has yet to get over 12 fantasy points since dating back to week 8, which has now been a month ago against, of all teams, the Rams, when he scored 20.3. Now that you don't have any of this production that he was having early on with Tyrod Taylor, people are going to shy away from him, right? He's not getting the consistent volume, although it was literally a 1-week sample. Brandon Cooks for 16.2 fantasy points is currently my number 1 value play at $5,800 on this slate at the wide receiver position. I like it a good amount. You get Mike Williams in your stacks for the Chargers, a fair price point. You get Michael Pittman, who it's so hard not to love Michael Pittman this week. Pittman is my number 3 value receiver. He is an easy run back in those stacks for Tampa Bay this week. A nice team total as an underdog is always going to grade out well, a 24 team implied total. The last couple of weeks, similar to Cooks, you're not seeing the production of only 4 fantasy points last week because they ran the ball 50 plus times. He still saw 5 targets in the game though, leading that team. And he continues to see the red zone volume. He's the clear number 1 in this offense. Michael Pittman, Brandon Cooks, the guys who stand out to me right now the most in the 5K range. Similar to Michael Pittman as a run back option, Jerry Jeudy becomes the run back option on the opposite side of those Charger stacks. Him, Noah Fant at the tight end position. Sutton's there at 5,400, but Sutton's volume is just absolutely erasing. Teddy Bridgewater is not hitting those downfield throws. Jerry Jeudy is getting the most volume in the slot, by far the most volume from Teddy Bridgewater since Jerry Jeudy has returned. The 3 games since Jeudy has returned, on limited snaps, he saw unlimited routes run, he saw 4 targets. Last 2 games, he's seen a red zone target in each of them with 8 and 9 targets during that time. It creates a fair price point, especially with that red zone usage for him. Again, although I do like Brandon Cooks and Pittman in this range the most right now, $5,500 Antonio Brown, if he plays, becomes the best play in this range. The lower 5K range is just made up of a lot of solid options, whether it's T. Higgins, who is now, after having a bad week, likely going to be very low owned. If you want to take stabs on the Marvin Jones or the Brandon Ayuk, who continues to play really well, Brandon Ayuk's in run backs of a Minnesota stack. That looks appealing. A Kirk Cousins plus a Jefferson running back with Brandon Ayuk will not be owned by any means. I have to pause on the Giants until we see the Sterling Shepard news. I'm projecting in Sterling Shepard right now, so it's not going to make me like Tony as much, who will get pushed to the outside, where Daniel Jones is basically just targeting the slot this year. New offensive coordinator can, of course, change that, though. Russell Gage, if you're playing Atlanta stacks. But we get down to this range now of the bottom of the 5K range and the 4K range. And the guys that stand out to me, I mean, Odell's fine in those stacks. I think Odell is definitely going to be dramatically, after only running like 10 routes, dramatically underrated and underowned for now having a better offense and a great matchup. No Jair Alexander still. The Packers' pass rush is still banged up. You saw Jefferson just torch Eric Stokes in that secondary last week, and so did Adam Thielen to a lesser extent. I think that can happen this week before Odell and Kupp, of course. But Jacoby Myers is here, just steady as they can be. I mean, continues to see the volume, Jacoby Myers. Not a lot of volume as they want to run the ball, so that's the concerning part. If Sterling Shepard returns, expect him to go into the slot. We had that sample a couple of weeks back with Tony and Shepard active. Shepard got the slot role, Tony the outside role, and that slot role for Daniel Jones is basically what he's loved his whole entire NFL career. So between the same price principle of Shepard and Myers, if I had to choose one of them, I would go with Shepard because I just think there's more of a chance at upside and volume there, especially since you're going to be having them playing as a bigger underdog in that game, whereas New England is about a touchdown favorite. So let's put Jacoby Myers instead of as a yes. Let's put him as a maybe. We'll prefer to go to Sterling Shepard there. Van Jefferson at 4,900. I'll prefer Odell over Van Jefferson, but both of those guys clear good stacking options. We can close it out with some value receivers now. Corey Davis has to stay in play. I know Elijah Moore had the big game last week with Joe Flacco, and now it's kind of like, oh, hit the refresh button on all this because now you get Zach Wilson coming back, who, if anything, has had the best chemistry when he's played, and not that much chemistry because Corey Davis was hurt at times with a Corey Davis. So you can't even really look at last week. But Corey Davis did have 7 targets now in back-to-back games. Davis has had 6 or more targets in every game but 1 this year. He ended up having 100 air yards last week. In games with Zach Wilson this year, he's seen 100 air yards in 4 out of 5 of those games. So I do think there's a lot more upside here. You factor in the matchup for Corey Davis as well against Houston. Looks a lot better. To lesser extents, without Jamal Agnew, Laviska Shenault gets a little bit of a bump up. Nelson Aguilar, MVS, these are your deep shot guys. I'd prefer in that same price range a $4,000 price T.Y. Hilton, who, if you're looking at the game log, since this team is running so much, yeah, he doesn't look that great, but if this is the week where they have to throw and lean on Carson Wentz a little bit more, and you can get yours against Tampa Bay, that's where T.Y. Hilton becomes more appealing. This range is tough. Like, we have to track the news on A.J. Brown. Marcus Johnson is done for the year, so I think that puts Des Fitzpatrick, the rookie out of Tennessee, in his spot. If there's no A.J. Brown, I think that's where Nick Westbrook, who had 100 yards last week, can come into play. But you're going to see Dez Fitzpatrick take on the starting role for Marcus Johnson. He profiles out similar size, similar speed, similar skill set, rather than Nick Westbrook, who would take A.J. Brown's role. So with me expecting A.J. Brown as of right now to play, it leaves me to pause on Westbrook. If A.J. Brown is out, yes, you can get some Nick Westbrook, and I would like him even more than T.Y. Hilton in this range. But as we scroll down, not much is here. Zach Pascal in your Tampa Bay stacks at $3,500 is fine. It's just a flyer. Devontae Parker at $3,800 becomes a screaming yes, if indeed he's activated, though. He's eligible to return off IR, but the news right now is they don't know. He's uncertain, which a lot of players don't usually come back right away. No other values down here. $3,200 Dez Fitzpatrick I would expect to start this week. The problem is he's a raw rookie. He was taken in the middle rounds. He hasn't been that great overall. He couldn't even beat out Marcus Johnson, for example, who Marcus Johnson, say what you want about him, he's not a burner by any means. So if you liked playing Marcus Johnson last week, you take an even more of a step down this week in Dez Fitzpatrick in terms of your overall expectations. Other than that, though, not much. We'll see what ends up happening with Scotty Miller. He is now on the active roster, I believe. He had to get that on there by Tuesday. Otherwise, he has to sit for the rest of the year. Nothing else is down here other than that, though. So if you're looking for like full-on punt wide receivers, not many options. It's like Dez Fitzpatrick, maybe Scotty Miller, Zach Pascal. That's why you really have to live with a couple options in the 4K range and a lot of options in that 5K range right here where we see all these yeses. A 5K range is loaded this week. So that is the wide receiver position for all of you out there. And if you enjoyed that, the like button pops up right here. I appreciate that a ton. And if you want to know any props, currently I'm taking some early props right now. These are the current early props that I have for you on Prize Picks. You can tail these. You get a free $100 bet if you use the code SAL down below. We talked about Pittman. I take Pittman over 55.5 receiving yards. I have him for 72 receiving yards in this game. So we like that. And I have Matt Ryan over 240.5 receiving yards versus Jacksonville's atrocious secondary defense and pass rush. I currently have Matt Ryan for 275 passing yards. So I take those two, I combine them together, $50 prop to try and win $150 on prizepicks.com. If you use the code SAL, it's just over under on fantasy points on prop betting. Use the code SAL. It's legal in a lot more states than people think, like New York, for example. So use the over under, use the code. So you take the over-unders, use the code SAL, and bada bing, you have yourself a nice free bet up to $100, and you can take that one or take whichever ones that you want. So the wide receiver position is now done, all the beautiful people out there. Now we slide into and we finish it up with the tight end position this week. In the tight end position this week, it's like every single week. There's a couple of guys who look good. A lot of the pricing is now pretty efficient, if I'm being honest with you. And at this point, it's just kind of, can you fit things into your stacks? Like the tight end position this week, I think that there's like a solid 8 or 9 tight ends that are firmly in play. I mean, Tommy Tremble had 2 catches for 30 yards and won somebody the Millionaire Maker with that last week because he was so cheap. So just punting a random tight end who will run like 15 routes like Tremble did last week. I think he only ran like 12 routes. I have it right here. Tremble ends up running in that game 12 routes. He's 2 targets, 2 catches, 35 yards in the winning lineup because he was the flat minimum dirt cheap. So never be against just punting a flat minimum dirt cheap guy, because if he has 6 to 8 fantasy points, he can be the winning lineup for you. Normally you'll need all the other tight ends to bust like they did last week, like Dan Arnold not having any targets and those types of performances. So my stances on the expensive guys in George Kittle and Kyle Pitts are, yeah, they grade out pretty good. Yeah, I have them both for 14 plus fantasy points, 2 or more fantasy points more than anybody else on the slate. It depends on what you're doing though. On a week where there's a lot of expensive receivers, on a week where it's kind of shaky in the bottom ends of the quarterbacks and not that much really value wide receivers, it might be tough to get to these guys. If I had to choose one between the two of them, I would go to Kyle Pitts against Jacksonville. It's just a little bit cheaper than George Kittle, and I think there's more upside overall in Kyle Pitts' name. But I would rather go down a tier to this next range of tight end if you wanted to somewhat pay up, and I would rather go to Dallas Goedert and Mike Gesicki. I think you have a lot more upside in Mike Gesicki just from a volume standpoint, because I do believe that you're going to see way more passing attempts for Miami in this game. Gesicki coming off of a game where he sees 5 targets, 5 catches, 50 yards. It's like a floor game these days for Gesicki, especially if Parker continues to miss on 28 routes run. We are now to the point where Gesicki is seeing more volume than a Kittle, than a Kyle Pitts in his offense, seeing 7 targets per game compared to those guys slightly below 7. You're getting Gesicki seeing overall downfield usage 9.1 yards per target, is second only to Kyle Pitts. So you're getting this elite wide receiver usage, the 95 to 98% of the snaps at the wide receiver position for Gesicki, and it looks good. Now Dallas Goedert gets the big extension. Dallas Goedert is like the only guy in the passing game right now that is seeing volume. Somewhat Devonta Smith, but for the most part it's Dallas Goedert. The problem is you're lucky if you're getting Philadelphia now like 17, 14, 23, 24 pass attempts. You don't have the same upside on just pure volume. For Dallas Goedert to see 7 targets, it would have to be like a 40% target share these days, whereas 7 targets is like a 25% for Mr. Mike Gesicki because they're throwing much more. So Goddard coming off of the 8 target game, yeah, he says he sees a red zone target. He has 11.2 fantasy points. He had a touchdown in that game and ended up getting called back. So he's highly involved. He's slightly cheaper than Mike Gesicki. Right now, if I had to choose between the two of them, it's a coin flip. If you need to save the money, I'd go to Dallas Goedert. They basically both look similar to me point projection wise. Noah Fant at 4,600. He's fine. He's mainly a run come back. I don't really see a way where I go Font over Goddard if you're just going for a one-off, though. We keep scrolling down. Hunter Henry, the touchdown or bust himself, no interest. Gronk is not a yes for me right now, just because I want to see what happens with Antonio Brown. But Gronk, the red zone role is going to be there. The fact that we got Gronk to come back off of this back injury that got tweaked just a couple weeks before that, and he was able to go out there and have a full-time role and be highly involved in between the 20s, surprised me. I thought he'd have a red zone role, if anything. But he came out, he basically had his normal usage of 23 routes. He got 6 balls on 8 targets, saw a red zone target. He had 71 receiving yards and 13.1 fantasy points. He was a top 10 tight end in the week. So Rob Gronkowski for me, if Antonio Brown is ruled out, I'll put Gronk as a yes because I think it increases his target share overall. This is what happens. If Antonio Brown returns, it's Antonio Brown and Mike Evans on the outside and 3 wide receiver sets and Godwin in the slot, and Godwin gets a lot more of those underneath passes that Gronk was getting last week. But if you get Antonio Brown out, 3 wide receiver sets is Godwin on the outside, Evans on the outside, Tyler Johnson in the slot, and yeah, Tyler Johnson is not going to be as much of a security blanket for Brady as Gronk is going to be, or as a Godwin would be if it was Antonio Brown on the outside. So if there is no Antonio Brown, Gronk becomes a yes. Otherwise, he's just a maybe for me because I don't think you see as much check down opportunities. The touchdown upside is always there, though. These guys, Tyler Higbee has been the ultimate, only playing him in stacks. So if you're stacking Rodgers and you want to run it back with Higbee, sure. If you're stacking it the opposite way, mainly because of the fact, and now with Robert Woods out, it might change, mainly because of the fact the ways that he's getting there most of the time is with a touchdown. And if it's with a touchdown, it's going to be attached to just the game environment. I'd rather just stack him up. So Higbee's like the ultimate play him if you get the stacks of him. In these past 2 games, though, he's had 50 and 40 routes. He's playing a ton lately, but like you saw in the last game, he gets 11 points. He only really gets there with a touchdown. I'm fine to go right back to Dan Arnold. It was just a very weird week for Dan Arnold. He ended up going out there and seeing his normal usage in terms of routes run. Now there's no Jamal Agnew. If anything, that's going to help. He's been a productive player for them, while Laviska Shenault has not been. So Dan Arnold puts up a goose egg last week in the targets department. I don't think there's much to it, though. I think you're going to get right back. Like Dan Arnold going for 8, 5, 10, 7, and 7 targets the month before that, and then running 22 routes and just seeing 0 targets on similar snaps, 70% of the snaps. I don't think it's sustainable. If you're looking for some really cheap value guys, like below the $4,000 range, I mean, Ozoma's in there if you wanted to get to him. He's always hit or miss. Jared Cook at $3,000 is kind of the discount version of Tyler Higbee in terms of he's just cheap in general to get to, but he's kind of that cheaper guy that's just like, okay, you put him in your stacks. You go in there, you put him in your Charger stack. He's $3,000. He doesn't always, most of the time he's going to get there with a touchdown. He doesn't get the yardage. Like he has 1 game over 50 receiving yards since week 1. So you're looking at this and you're just saying, okay, Jared Cook mainly going to be in my stacks. He's only top 10 fantasy points once since week 6, mainly just going to be in the stacks. If it's a one-off, you might even be better just punting all the way down. Options to punt all the way down are kind of touchdown or bust players like a Mo Alley Cox, who you can also fit into your stacks at $2,600. I have him on here as a no, but I'm completely fine just going to a guy who is going to run 12 routes. He's going to see a red zone target. You hope it's a touchdown. You hope he has 8 to 10 points, and at that price point, he pays it off. Similar things can be said for Ryan Griffin, who's actually seeing some routes run. He is $2,600 as well for the New York Jets. The problem now is he's going to see his 3rd quarterback now in the last 4 weeks that he's played and been healthy. He had a decent connection with Mike White. He actually had a somewhat decent connection on the routes that he was running with Joe Flacco. It's now just a question of how does that all translate. If you just want to go to the complete punt route, especially with there not being as much sturdy wide receiver bottom end value right now, I think that's fine. You've seen 7, 2, and 4, 13, 3, and 7 fantasy points for Ryan Griffin these last 3 games. I think it's completely fine. So that is the tight end position. That is the week 12 slate right there, a 10-game slate. Saturday will be the That One Dude, the leverage video as always. Sunday morning is going to be the Closing Thoughts podcast on Patreon only, and that's where I just talk about all my exposures, my game theory, my strategy. You can come in on Patreon down below if you want to. And then Sunday live stream, bring your questions and answers. We'll start at 10:30 a.m. East Coast time, go for about an hour to an hour and a half. So it's been a busy week. Hopefully you can take all those dollar rooskies you won from the NBA and more so the NFL slate on Thanksgiving. We could roll them into now the week 12 slate. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. I appreciate you a ton. Be sure to support the sponsors of the show. They make this show go round. Dibs.io. You get your 2 free packs, your 2 free Frac packs if you use that code SAL on your first deposit, up to each of those packs valued up to potentially $50. I can't believe we got that Aaron Rodgers pack. I mean, I love that. I love that Aaron Rodgers card. I'm going to keep that until the day that I die or until it's worth a ton more than it currently is right now. 1% of that Aaron Rodgers rookie card. So you can get that at Dibs.io. You can take the props with a free $100 bet over on PrizePicks.com. Code SAL on both of those sites. Get you all the free goodies. Thank you for tuning in, gang. I'll see you when I see you, gang, and I'll see you in the next one.